financing the African Continental Free Trade Area. So the World Bank says the African Continental Free Trade Area agreement is estimated to be as large as 1.3 billion people across Africa, with a combined GDP of $3.4 trillion. So this has the potential of lifting up to 30 million Africans out of poverty. A little bit earlier on, we heard Wamkele Mene speaking about how by 2035, over 100 million Africans could be lifted out of poverty if the AFCFTA is properly implemented. What else is it promising? Over $2 trillion in combined GDP, over 1.2 billion of the population being much more able to afford things and much more prosperous, rather. 3.4% of the world's FDI only flows into Africa. With the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, that obviously could be increased. So these are some of the promises that the African Continental Free Trade Area is promising. How is that agreement being financed? Let's go there to some of the challenges when it comes to financing. Around $4.5 billion is coming from banks and development finance institutions and multilateral organizations that has been pledged towards going to the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Two Chinese financial institutions have made over $800 million of financing available for Afreximbank to support trade-enabling infrastructure projects. That's also something that we heard being spoken about in Durban at the IATF. Wamkele Mene saying that when it comes to the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, the most important thing is investing in industry in order to develop properly, and countries need to work together. Otherwise, the potential will not be reached. The African Union has galvanized over 52 African governments to sign the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. That aim, of course, is to create a single market and the largest free trade area in the world. So in 2021, how far along is the continent in ratifying the agreement? This is what Tralak is saying about the number of countries that have signed and are ratifying the agreements. That graphic is live on your screen. Now, earlier I spoke to Sérgio Pimenta. He's the International Finance Corporation's Regional Vice President for Africa, on how this agreement is being financed. And I also asked him about the role of the IFC in that. Let's take a look.
The first thing I would say is that, how important trade is for Africa. And when we see the impact of the pandemic on the economies in Africa, it's even more important that the trade in Africa happens within Africa, so that the African countries increase trade among themselves. Africa must trade with Africa. And this is one of the areas that IFC is supporting and has increased its interventions in order to help the African trade grow. We've been doing it through a few different approaches. First, we've been working a lot on regional connectivity and supporting sub-regional infrastructure so that the trade can be developed along these lines. The second aspect has been building around value chains and helping establish and develop stronger value chains within Africa so that countries can trade more and companies can trade more in the continent. And then the third part that we've been really working on is a lot about disseminating new and stronger, more inclusive private sector solutions for trade all over Africa. And they're focusing on partnerships, on of course, capital flows, but on how we can help develop the entire sector.
Let's talk more about trade in the private sector and the importance that the private sector plays in trade in Africa.
So, trade is one of the activities that by definition is the best supported by private sector. And when you look at how companies in the continent work, every company wants to operate in bigger markets and very soon step up into the space of helping on the trade side, because you want to trade with your neighboring countries, you want to trade across the region and also outside of the continent, of course, but that's part of where the private sector really plays an important role. And it plays an important role on two ways. On the trade directly itself, you trade goods, you trade merchandise and so on, but also on the trade finance part. And there's no trade without trade finance. And that's one of the areas that private sector can play a very important role. The financial institutions, the banks, the non-banking financial institutions are really providing the trade finance that is needed to support trade. And what is particularly important in Africa is that you see that a lot of the companies, particularly the smaller ones, small and medium-sized companies, don't have enough access to trade finance. They don't have enough access to finance, and specifically trade finance. And this is one of the areas that we've been really working on to see how we can increase the number of banks that are playing a key role in trade finance. We're helping them become confirming banks through our trade programs. In South Africa, for instance, we've worked with ABSA, we've worked with Rand Merchant Bank. These are partners that we work on, but we work with the large number of banks in Africa, smaller banks, bigger banks, to make sure that they support small and medium-sized companies across Africa on the trade side.
Of course, we can't talk about trade in 2021 or any other year post-COVID without talking about the impact of COVID-19 on trade and what kind of financing instruments are required in order to facilitate trade so the African continent does recover. So,
we've all seen the impact of COVID on trade. Trade globally went down by 15% last year. And in Africa, actually, this decline has also happened, but not as strong. It's been 6%, but still, it's a decline, and we need to reverse that, and we need to increase the trade so that the activities restart, jobs are created again, opportunities on the economic front come again, and this is an important task for all of us that we need to work on. And so, what kind of instruments are needed? Well, there's several opportunities that I think we can bring in, and one of the most important ones is all the opportunities that are brought about by the digital economy. And you see that today, more and more of our activities are relying on the digital world and digital transformation, digital innovation. And this is an area that also impacts trade and can impact it actually positively. So we need to help that front. We need to help with digital solutions, digital innovation, digital technologies. They improve the profitability, they improve the efficiency of the sector, and they improve how trade can be done. The second part that I would also mention is the importance of looking at the national regulations that surround trade. And with a link, by the way, with the digital economy, because in order to deploy new digital approaches, you do need also an evolution of regulation, and regulations need to adjust to this new world. So this is one of the aspects that I think we need to also focus on. And then, as I was mentioning earlier, the work around supply chains is also very important. And this is one of the instruments that needs to be developed. That you look at a product from the very first step to the last step of the value chain, and you identify what are the bottlenecks and what can be done in order to improve the value chains, because across value chains is where you create employment. It's when you really make sure that you reach to the farmer, to the producer, to the artisan, to the small companies, to the men and women in Africa who are producing products and goods, and that then can enter into the trade chain.
Earlier on, you spoke about the importance of Africa trading with itself. We know that the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement has been implemented this year. What do you think the future of intra-Africa trade is, if all goes well? So
the future of Africa trade, I think, will depend on a certain number of factors, and the fact that African countries are entering or have entered into this African-wide, continent-wide free trade agreement. This is a major step. This is a game changer. This is something that will create a lot of opportunities to African economies, to African private sector, to really step up its activities, get more opportunities, get more activities to be done. So this is a very positive development for trade. And we can look at all the data, how much this will impact. And what is interesting is that when you see the impact that the Intercontinental Free Trade Agreement will have on the African economies, it will be stronger in many dimensions because of having a markets that are more open and more opportunities for trade. So I believe that this is the future for the trade in Africa. I'm optimistic. I think the future looks bright. There's many things that can happen. We need to support, we need to help on capacity building, we need to help, as I said, on new technologies and digital economy, on regulations, on value chains. But with the support, I mean, IFC is very keen on doing it. We just announced a $1 billion initiative to support trade in Africa. And this will be really, I think, instrumental to help develop this sector further. With our support of other partners and many other participants, I'm sure that trade will have a very bright future in Africa.
Mzansi.